Hello and welcome back to the News Project Live on GNAT-TV's Facebook page. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today on Friday, March 25th. A little computer technical issue there. Anyway, good to be back. It's been a couple of weeks. Thought we'd start off today up in Montpelier, since there's a group of fairly important bills that are making their way through the legislature, presumably on their way to the governor's desk, that we just want to mention that are on track. The Vermont House gave preliminary approval to an 8.1 billion dollar state budget on yesterday, advancing a spending plan that invests the last of Vermont's COVID relief dollars on housing and climate change and clean water and broadband. Also will boost education and spending on education and human services. That bill is scheduled for a final vote in the House today, and then we'll head on to the Senate for where they'll pass judgment on it. We're also closely following two other bills. One deals with housing, and the other with Act 250. It's been kind of interesting to watch the progress of these two. The housing bill, known as S226, under the Golden Dome anyway, deals with expanding access to housing, and the other one, S234, deals with changes to Act 250, particularly with regard to downtown development, to see if there might be possible to get more housing in downtown areas going on. We all know there's a big housing crunch around the state, all over the state, and downtown areas are one of the areas that are being closely looked at to see if that might be part of the solution. Uh, the housing bill, the first one I mentioned, S226, um, includes provisions to establish neighborhood development areas and low-cost affordable housing, workforce housing that folks might be able to take advantage of. And it also, and here's kind of one of the sticking points that's bubbled up, it also includes a home contractor registry. Uh, and As some of you who followed the legislature know, that's been a problem for Governor Phil Scott. He doesn't want to, he's vetoed that provision in an earlier bill, and spoke about it this past Tuesday at his weekly press conference. Uh, that was kind of interesting because it seemed like there was a kind of a real edgy tone, you might say, to some of what he was talking about when it came to some of these housing bills and the way the legislature was structuring them. There seemed to be some clear issues going on there, but those may yet be resolved. Um, the other one, the one dealing with Act 250, also includes provisions to prevent forest fragmentation. In other words, forests being, nibbled away at to create more housing. And that was a proposal that the governor vetoed last year in a different bill. So we'll see where those go. But The governor and the legislative leaders say that they both understand that there's a real housing shortage. They're trying to figure out ways to make that work, and also how much of the American Rescue Plan Act money should go into helping build more new housing and construction. Uh, the uh, the governor had hoped to put in $70 million in ARPA funds. The legislature opted to put in 55 from a different source, and that is another issue that the governor and the legislative leaders are kind of trying to work through. Um, but anyway, the governor has made clear he's very unhappy with the project, with the package as it's proposed currently, and uh, they administration officials are saying they object less to the priorities in the spending plan than they do of how much the lawmakers want to spend and which pots of money they're using. So we'll see where that all goes. We are hoping to do a little segment of our own around housing and the Act 250 bills. They're kind of closely related, and we will hope to get that underway in the next week or so. Uh, Also, there's some action on the education front in the legislature happening, particularly one bill that involves using public money for independent schools. The Vermont Senate voted on Wednesday to advance legislation that would set limits on public money going to private and religious schools. Vermont students living in choice towns where municipalities don't have their own high school or local schools, and therefore send students to other schools. Um, they can use public money to help finance their students going to not just other public schools but also private schools. So that's been a long-running issue, as many folks know, and also one dealing with a religious school has been another long-running problem. But anyway, the bill that was approved by the state senate on Wednesday aims to define adequate safeguards and to impose conditions on schools that receive the money. It would require that private schools or independent schools follow anti-discrimination laws that currently apply to public schools and would prohibit religious schools from using public tuition dollars to support explicit religious instruction. We were also going to be following that fairly closely as well. This coming Monday, we're going to be having State Senator Brian Campion and State Representative Kathleen James on a program and talk with them about this bill and another one that I'm going to mention in a moment, uh, just to kind of get their sense as to what's involved here and what's included. Um, there's some other aspects to it. The public money for independent schools bill also would limit them where students could go to attend private schools in other states. The idea would be to kind of keep them the eligibility for that within the borders of Vermont. That could include Quebec and Canada, but mainly New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. Um, so we'll leave that there for now. The other one is about school meals that we'll be talking about Monday with our legislators, along with a few other things like the state colleges and perhaps um, you know trade and vocational instruction. But anyway, on the school meal situation, the Vermont House gave preliminary approval to a bill on Wednesday that would put part of the education fund surplus towards buying down tax rates and also set aside money to keep feeding all kindergarten through 12th grade students for free. They've been able to do that through some of the federal dollars that have come through the COVID relief funds. But there's some interest in maybe keeping that program going. Question, of course, is then what bucket of money will pay for that, and that, of course, is going to be a subject of some debate since when the federal dollars run out, that money will have to come from another source. So, um, that's the main sticking point. Updated estimates from legislative analysts peg the cost for universal meals at about $28 million next year, although the long-term costs could grow to up to $35 million annually. Okay, moving on. I just wanted to mention before we leave Montpelier, there's also been a lot of discussion about the so-called clean heat standard. That was an idea that grew out of the climate initiative that the state was working on last year to try and get carbon emissions down to a lower level than we are currently producing. And a bill was advanced last week. It would create the state's first ever clean heat standard. The bill is now before the Senate. This standard would create a marketplace where fossil fuel wholesalers and importers who do business in Vermont would have to buy or create basically credits of one sort or another in proportion to the amount of climate warming emissions their projects or products generate. The idea is that these credits would then be uh, generated by doing things that reduce emissions from heating buildings, and primarily that would mean weatherizing homes and businesses and helping Vermonters switch to heat sources that would emit fewer carbon emissions. Very contentious piece of legislation. We are also hoping to have a conversation around this subject in a couple of weeks from now between one of the advocates for the Clean Heat Standard and someone who has concerns about the way this is being set up. So we will keep our eyes peeled on all three of those, the Housing Act 250 and the Clean Heat Standard as we go forward. Um, and a lot of activity underway as the legislature in Montpelier gets into the second half of its session. Turning to COVID numbers, just real briefly, they certainly look a lot better than they were doing a couple of months ago, although case counts are still hovering between 1 and 200 a day. The most recent numbers come from the State Health Department today are 159 new cases statewide, but only 12 folks now in the hospital and none in the ICU in any of the state hospitals in around Vermont. So that's a big improvement right there. The total number of deaths is now 615 Vermonters that we've lost since the start of the pandemic 2 years ago. Back to case count numbers in Bennington County, we're seeing a big drop from what we've been seeing. Again, a couple of months ago, only 5 new cases in Bennington County since yesterday, and only 31 over the past 2 weeks. And those of you who've been following these numbers know that that's a drastic drop. Next door in Windham County, we have 5 new cases there, 87 over the past 2 weeks. Up in Rutland County, 12 new cases, 117 over the past 2 weeks. Again, significant drops in those, but it's still interesting to see that we're still looking at 1 to 200 new cases every day, pretty much. That has been apparently a tough number to get below. So let's see how that goes. Turning locally and just turning to a feel-good event, feel-good story, and related to COVID. In-person events will now be returning to the North Shore bookstore. Many of you, I'm sure, recall going to the bookstore and hearing authors discuss recent works, reading from their books, discussing their novels. Those will be returning to the bookstore after the last couple of years. Of course, have all been remote or on Zoom, but Friday, April 1st at 5:30 p.m., there will be the first author event going on. That will be followed by another one the next Friday on April 8th, also at 5:30. That's a new start time. I think they used to be more like 6:30 or 7, but anyway, 5:30. So there'll be several local authors who will be reading from some of their books, and you can go to the North Shore Bookstore's website and learn more about them. Booktopia is also returning in May. I believe it's May 7th and 8th. That event, of course, is another big favorite for many folks. So, mark your calendars. Otherwise, locally, just wanted to mention that town meeting is not quite over yet. Town meeting will be happening in Weston on April 5th. That's a Tuesday. It'll be held at the Weston Playhouse. And over in Londonderry, they will do their town meeting on April 30th. That will be at the town hall there on Middletown Road. We'll end with a nice little feel-good story. The Vermont State Police has announced they've collected 3 tons of body armor for folks in Ukraine. You may recall last week they put out an announcement saying that they'd be collecting used body armor to send over to Ukraine to help folks who might need it over there. And yesterday they released a press release saying that law enforcement agencies and members of the public have donated about 1,000 body armor vests and 45 helmets to the Vermont State Police. And those donations came from across Vermont, and total over 3 tons of equipment. So those will be on their way to Ukraine as soon as possible. All right, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you for being with us. Hope you've enjoyed our show and are looking forward to the weekend. And we will not be back next week, but hopefully the week after that, we'll have a chance to bring you the News Project live on our Facebook page. Andrew McKeever for GNAT-TV and our News Project. Hope you had a great week. We'll see you again soon. Take care.